The recent case of a professor jailed for impersonation to assist his daughter in an examination brings to light not only issues within our educational system, but also the values we may be unknowingly passing down to the young generation of citizens. This is a case of a father taking an exam for his own daughter. And the question we are forced to ask is, where is the place of lessons of integrity and accountability taught within families? Such incidents not only undermine the trust in our educational institutions, but also cast a shadow over the value of academic qualifications in our society. This scenario raises a troubling pattern of critical questions, like what message are we sending to the next generation about honesty and hard work? It also raises critical issues shaking the foundations of academic integrity. This so-called action has fetched a 6-month jail sentence or a fine of 100,000 naira as pronounced by a Chief Magistrate Court in Abuja on October 24, 2024. So, join me in the next 25 minutes to unpack the implications of impersonation during examinations and explore the broader societal impacts when shortcuts are normalized. Thanks for joining us. I am Eukaria Clinton, and this is Nigeria Today. Now, with me in the studio for the conversation is Dr. Philip Hayab. He's a teacher, educator, and a peace and conflict researcher. You're welcome to Nigeria Today.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
And also joining us via Zoom is Reverend David Ugolo. He's a co-chair, United Nations Convention Against Corruption Coalition, and also is Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, ANEJ. Thanks for joining us on Nigeria Today.
Thank you very much.
Let me start with you, Dr. David. Of course, you listened to the introduction and the case involving a professor, coming to sit for an exam for the daughter. Now, how does this impact the perception of academic integrity in higher institutions? So, Reverend, if you're there, I said, how does it impact the perception of academic integrity in higher institutions? Talking about the case involving the professor that wrote exam for the daughter.
I think first, it's a reflection of the ethical mess we have found ourselves in the country. It again, since it explains, is a classical case of how the entire integrity of exam processes have been damaged in the country. But as you know, this is not the first time it has happened. What is really, really very concerning is how the authority will take lessons from this process to strengthen and build ethical framework so that it becomes impossible. And if it happens, there is a consequence for it. And in the case of JAM, as you know, this is one exam body that, again, provides opportunity for qualified candidates to be admitted into university. So if this platform becomes corrupt, then it becomes difficult to ascertain the kind of candidate and the standard. And that you have seen that really affecting the quality of candidates that are going to the university. And I think this is what has prompted most of the universities across the country to say, look, we now have to have another exam processes within our university to ascertain if this so-called high grades, some student parade, when they write their exams, they are really qualified to come to their university, which again, it duplication, and it again increases costs, which is not very good for the country, particularly for the very poor in the country. And this for me is something that we all need to learn lesson from. Rather than pointing finger, I think all stakeholders has to come together, because this also, you can see, it also affect parents, it also affect the government, it also affect the regulatory institutions around. And so that's why I feel that collective approach is the best approach to tackle this really big challenge that is confronting the entire country.
But Reverend David, I know we are going to talk about the way forward, when we have exhausted some other issues around this case. Now, Doctor, a case where a supposed, will I say, a professional in the academic world, these are the people we look up to. Talking about the professor, coming on to write for the daughter. Now, how will you explain this situation? Is it an extreme case of love for the children? No, because I don't really understand it. Why a prof would stoop that low to go into the examination hall to write an exam for the child?
Okay, thank you. First, I'm not sure the man is a professor. That is to start with. All the news, the channels I have read, some were actually very technical to even put the professor in court. So if he's a professor, then the first thing should not be him being jailed, but the name of the university where he works should be named, and then the university should sack him. The consequence should be much more than just this idea of this jail time of 6 months or an option, I think, of 100,000. But if he happens to truly be a professor, then that is a big shame, showing that the likelihood that he became a professor by compromise is very, very high. Without having to speak less of the academic world where I actually come from, to a large extent, most of the people with higher certificates in Nigeria have actually bribed their ways. Because when you meet people and they tell you they are professors or they are doctors, and then you have a conversation with them, you begin to question, how did they write this dissertation? How did they study? How did they acquire these degrees? And so this is unfortunate. So it is a sign, like the Reverend said, it is actually showing the moral decadence that we have in our country. People who are supposed to uphold the practices, people who are supposed to be beacon of hopes, people who are supposed to be shining lights. Now, let's not just look at him even as a professor, if he is a professor, but as a parent. How do you now command the moral right to correct your child in the course of their lives when you have actually helped them to cheat in an exams? So yes, there's a problem with impersonation, but when you look at it, it actually is not just impersonation, it's a collusion. So those who were able to support him, we will commend them for their ability to do that. But what the man, I think Josiah did is actually something that all of us who have a morality sense should condemn. As a parent, he is not supposed to do what he has done. Then to talk about him being an academic, then that is actually worse off. So it's really unfortunate, but I commend the court. The ruling actually shows that yes, now henceforth there is a reference point. Anybody who does this kind of things should be punished, and punished publicly. So we should name it. Why are we hiding, if he's a professor, why are we hiding where he works? We need to know the name of the university or the college where he works so that we can actually call the spade a spade.
Okay, back to you, Reverend David. These kinds of action, what signal does it send to the students? Or let me just say the youth generally. What signal does it send to them? Please, on your mic, Reverend. Your mic is not on.
No, I said yes. I said it's already sending the signal, and you can see the entire country, the youth, most of the youths are finding it difficult now to um, prepare for exams because they obviously believe that it's easier to compromise the system, to go through the system in a more less rigorous way. And you can't blame the youth in the country because if, as a parents, if you are not a responsible father or a mother, you don't have the moral right to question your children when they are going wrong. The leadership of the country, we've got problem. You know, the leadership, because there's writing an exam can be compared to somebody who steal public money. If you are a governor or you are a president of a country and you steal public money, there's nothing worse than that. There's nothing worse than that. So, and when you look at the country today, the level of corruption, so because of lack of leadership, so this affects the entire country, and the youths are learning from the leaders. And so when when you look other sector of the economy, because the youth are alive, they see what is going on in the judiciary, they see what is going on in the educational sector, they see what is going on in governance, they see how people who are not qualified, but because their father and their mother are in a politically exposed position, they gain employment into all the choice company in the country, into the choice agency in the country. You go to CBN, you go to NNPC, you find out that it's children of governors, it's children of senators that are employed, but competent children of poor home, very poor home, they don't get employment. So people are getting discouraged. So the culture of trying to get things through the back door has made the entire system. And so this has empowered and empower more youths to be finding other ways to go around. Now you can imagine a professor. Now that will shock you, but that's just a little story. It explains how the country has found itself in a mess. So to solve the problem is not to point fingers towards the youth. The leaders must take responsibility. And leadership is across the board. In the church, in the government, in the private sector, we must take responsibility. If leaders cannot take responsibility and provide leadership, then it becomes difficult for you to have ethical exams in the country. JAM, you need a leadership. When the leadership is not put in the right perspective, it will be difficult to solve this problem.
Back to you, Doc. Tell us, I know you're in the education system, you've been there for a while. What are some of the reasons that you think that would make a student or even parents resort to impersonation during examinations?
Okay. Generally speaking, exam malpractice is not being frowned at in the way it should. So people feel that they can actually cut corners. And you know, when it comes to cutting corners, it's compromise, refusing to work. Hard work no longer pays, which is supposed to be the case. And then we also practice an education system that is just exam-based. I should pass these exams and move on. But the learning should be far much more beyond exams. Once people, learners, anybody in school learns, then the chances would be that when they come to write exams, they'll write the best of what they can do. You don't have to score 300. But then you see this whole issue about impersonation, particularly as it relates to JAM, is where the problem is coming from. You pass JAM, the minimum requirement. Look at all the brouhaha that we did, and JAM came up and said you can have 140 and go to the university. But how many genuine students or candidates with 140 will ever get admitted into the school? So we're not telling ourselves the truth. We just making paying lip service. I would say that if we have a cutoff mark, that let the people with that cutoff mark get to the university by merit. I went to the university by merit. So when I was writing JAM, I prepared because at that time merit was there. If you pass, you will go to the university by merit. If not all the universities, there will be one. But then in the case now where even with merit, when learners score the correct score, You now start to look at whether they are this religion, whether they are this region, and there is no way we will make headway. So the compromise of excellence, which is what I actually have talked about even the other time that we were here on this program, that once you compromise excellence, it gives room for all cutting of corners. When people drive, you know, like you asked the Reverend that what is the implication? The implication is that the young people are learning from us, the elders, by not doing the right thing. So we beat traffic, and children are sitting in the car, they see us. What do you expect in the years to come? They also beat traffic. After all, my father beat the traffic and nothing happened. My mother beat the traffic. We sit in the vehicle, we insult everyone that comes, drives behind us or along us. These children are copying. So now it's the same thing with cutting corners leading to impersonation. So impersonation, yes, because it is an exams case and because the name of the guy is associated with being a professor, but it is actually something that is happening in this country. How many elections have been truthful in this country? And these children see it. These young people, they see it. And therefore, they practice. But one of the challenges is that children must not get to a certain step level by all means. I think by all means is also another problem. Like this, so the parent is looking at this girl has to go now. But why not allow her write the exams? If she, God forbid, if she fails, she can write again. You motivate her, give her the books, give her the support. I'm sure the girl might even have the capacity to score the grades that will have taken her to the university. But because we are so desperate, and you know, once a person is desperate, it becomes actually very susceptible to any kind of temptation. And what has happened in this case of Mr. Justice, which I'm sure I would not want to believe is a professor until I'm proven otherwise, is actually a representation of what is happening. Because for some parents, they won't go to impersonate for their children, but they pay money to the schools to read out the results, which is the same thing. So it is that this one is 99 days for the thief, 1 day for the owner. In this case, 99 days for all of us Nigerians. So we Nigerians, so we need to just sit up. The people who lead us, what are their qualifications? What is the sincerity of what is happening? So there are a lot of things in this country. From Buhari to this time, we've always had scandals about the certificates of our leaders. And if these things show and nothing happens, you don't expect a small child to believe that maybe she mounted pressure on her father, God forbid, or maybe the father was the one who succumbed. So it's not love. It's actually spoiling the child. No parent, at any rate, should go to the level this man who has been jailed, Mr. Justice, to go and help their child. I think it is the last thing that you can ever do against, for your family, for the name of your family, is something that we should not be proud of.
Okay. Now, Reverend David, what picture does these kinds of scenario paint for Nigeria outside the country?
Well, I think Prof. Dr. have actually give us a good picture of the danger of allowing this kind of culture to continue to grow in our country. And the signal and the implication is very clear. When companies are trying to recruit talent for company, they don't look at Nigeria because they obviously think that the quality of education is porous. And if you look countries where they don't perform very well in the corruption perception index, particularly country like Nigeria, where their corruption perception is very high, it is difficult for you to build talent for such a country. So you can see a correlation with country that perform poorly in corruption and poor talent, human development. And so investment don't come to those kind of climates, because for you to build innovation, you need an ecosystem where there is talent. And talent are deficit in a country like Nigeria, because a country where employment, or to secure a job, you don't necessarily have to be good. You don't necessarily have to have quality education. All you need to do is to know governor, is to know a senator, is to know who is your, everything is network. So when you have this kind of patron-client system, it becomes difficult to build such a country. So what are we saying? So that you don't look that everything is negative. In the face of all this challenge, there are also still highlands of integrity And that's why we must commend institutions like NTA that are trying to also position these kind of conversations in their agenda, that it is in our interest as a country to begin to reverse this culture so that we can begin to grow the economy of the country. Because if you don't have a good quality educational system, which can be provided by a quality exam process like which the JAM is supposed to be providing, it will be difficult for you to attract international investment into such a country. And once international investment don't come into the country, you can't talk about economic growth. And once there is no economic growth, you can't talk about development. And when there is no development, you will continue to be seeing this syndrome of Jackpot. It's a situation where even the trained doctors, the trained engineers are moving out of the country because there is no job. The unemployment level is increasing. But to reverse this direction, we need to have this conversation and say, look, the quality of education that we have in the country, we need to find a way to strengthen it. We need to also send a strong signal, the political will of our leaders to demonstrate that they are honest with what they are asking the people to do. Because I said, using the example of a father, you must provide example, and that's what Dr. also have re-emphasized. Again, we must show example. The political elite of this country must show example. If they look, when you go to admission in the university, you see the quality of people that they admit. Obviously, because there is always the politically exposed list. There is always a back door to enter the university. There is also a back door to get job in the country. When you do all this kind of thing, it doesn't help the country in the long run. Even those who are currently benefiting from this kind of system, in the long run, it affects them. Because when the quality of the country is not improving, things go wrong. Even those who think they have resources, those who have investment, those who have asset, their asset cannot go anywhere. It becomes a stranded asset. And that's why we are encouraging the country leadership to begin to think on how to reverse this culture. And the best way is to put the right people in the right position. Is to begin to listen to people who are picking out the truth on how we can reverse this culture of patronizing people who are not competent in positions of power. Because the political leadership of the country has responsibility to position the right people in JAM, the right people in employment processes. And that's the way to proceed.
Thank you so much, Reverend David. Now, Dr. Philip, now tell us, how can we encourage hard work among our students, among the youth? Because it's like hard work has been thrown out of the window.
Yes. So one of the ways to encourage hard work is to allow competence, allow excellence to dictate who gets to where. And then also to have a sort of a system that also takes care of those who are not as good as those who have the excellence. In society, anywhere in the world, maybe if you're an excellent student, there are certain benefits you get, but those students who are not as excellent as you are, they will still be able to pass through the system. So we must free our system to be a system where hard work, it is the ability or the amount of effort a person puts on that they get something in return. And this thing is something visible, something what we call evidence-based. So it's not about favoritism, but it was you been working hard and getting to where you're supposed to get. You might not be number one, but you could be number 10 and you still be okay. So that is one. The other thing I would say is that we have to say things and do it. When I was in ABU Zaria, during the time Professor Abdullah Mahdi was the Vice Chancellor, in our exam halls there used to be CCTV. He would bring in cameras. There weren't CCTV cameras, but people come with cameras like this you have in the NTA, and they film. So if you cheat in the exams, for instance, and you're caught, there's an evidence against you. So we have to be more stringent about our rules in terms of exams and to abide by them. When we say any student caught in exam malpractice or any parent abating an exam malpractice, these are the rules. So we talk about expelling them from school. In this case of JAM, maybe the child is stopped from writing JAM for 2 years. A parent goes to jail, not beyond just 1 year, and make it public. There is no reason to cover for the personality of whosoever that is
But
doing
again,
it.
I ask, must everybody go to the university?
That is another thing. Not everyone can actually go to the university, but you see, we've made it to look as if once you don't make it to the university,
What
you
about
can't be
skills?
anything.
Skills.
We have to learn skills. If I have a child today that I can actually see an evidence that they can survive in the university, I won't push them to the university.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I'll allow them do what they can do
Thank you
with
so
their
much,
hands.
Dr.
Yes.
Dr. Philip Hayab, a teacher, educator, and a peace conflict researcher. Thank you so much for your time and your contribution. And we also had via Zoom Reverend David Ugolo. He's a co-chair United Nations Convention Against Corruption Coalition, also executive director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice and Aid. Thank you so much for your time and your contribution.
Thanks. Yeah.
I thank you for being part of the program. I am Victoria Clayton. Goodbye.